Let's return to our top story, the attack at the synagogue in Manchester. And I'm joined now by Mark Adlestone, who's chair of the Jewish Representative Council of Greater Manchester and Region. Thank you very much for your time this evening. Let's start by talking about the two men who tragically lost their lives, because it is appearing that they were both heroically trying to protect both the synagogue and worshippers inside.
Yeah, no, absolutely true. It's an absolute tragedy. They were heroes. And I know they were very close to Rabbi Daniel Walker, who leads Heaton Park Synagogue. It was just very tragic.
And I know you know the rabbi as well. We heard from him a short time ago. How is the community coping?
The community's in shock. I think he was sort of talking about the fact that we're still trying to process what has happened. It's been incredibly difficult. I think there's anger, and I think there's fear. I think there's a combination of all of those things that are happening within our community.
Yeah, you talk about anger. I understand you were on the stage today at the vigil with the Deputy PM when he was heckled. That was, a difficult moment. What did you make of it?
It was interesting. I wasn't quite sure what sort of reception the Deputy PM would receive, but it became clear very quickly that there was a lot of anger in the crowd. And at first I tried to quieten them down. And then I actually thought, you know what? No, let it happen. Let the anger come out. Let the expressions of real pain come out. Let him hear them. And then eventually I quietened the crowd down, and they did listen to him, but they gave him a tough time for good reason.
Yeah, well, talk to me about that. Why were they so angry?
Well, I think it's, look, we've got this difficult situation with the conflation of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. Everything seems to go back to that. Everything seems to go back to Israel. And so given that fact, and given the fact that in the main, Jewish people within this country have a strong connection, whilst being proud British Jews, have a strong connection to the state of Israel, and the fact that a Palestinian state was recognized by the British government without any conditions or any preconditions on Hamas was just a step too far. It was, it was something we find very, very difficult to accept, that it's almost as if Hamas have been rewarded for their slaughter of the 7th of October.
Is there also an issue, though, that perhaps the Israeli government and certain figures within it aren't carrying out this conflict in a way that many people agree with?
Well, the interesting thing is, I'm a British subject, and you're talking to me about Israeli policy, which I find very interesting. I vote for the government that we have. I have a democratic right to do so. I do not have a democratic right to vote for the Israeli government, because I'm not Israeli. And no British Jew, or very few British Jews, are actually Israeli. So we're being asked to comment on a war, a very, very complicated war that's happening 2,500 miles away. And our point is, why is the pain and the grief, and it's awful, without a doubt, war is awful. Why should that be coming onto the streets of Greater Manchester in our case? That is our point.
Just finally, I'm going to speak to someone shortly who is Jewish, but says that she's going to go on one of these demonstrations this weekend. What do you make of that, firstly? And secondly, do you think those marches shouldn't take place?
Well, I certainly don't think the marches should be taking place now. It's almost like a glorification of the death of these two lost souls, and it's heartbreaking, actually, and it's cruel. And I think if they had any decency about them, they would at least hold off, because I actually have no problem with the marches per se. with the concept of people supporting a Palestinian state. No problem with that at all. I do have a problem, however, with some of the rhetoric, the nasty rhetoric and the anti-Semitic rhetoric that actually is taking place on many of the marches. I think if we look at the marches, probably half of the people there genuinely have humanitarian concerns. I understand that. And half of them are there to cause trouble and are driven by anti-Semitic philosophy, I would say. So as for this lady who's going, fair play to her, that's up to her. She doesn't represent the view of the vast majority of British Jews, is what I would say. And you're always going to find outliers. Of course you are.